Welcome, everybody. My name is Carlos Marrero. I'm the Delegates Manager of Tilt Pro. I am a part of the Association Creativity Cultural Connections, and we are right now in the first session for the Tilt online training program with our first speaker, Laura Camacho Salgado. Before giving a heads up to the conference, I would like to introduce a little bit about our project. So Tilt, which means Turin is louder today, is not just another concert series, but a social project aiming to bring artistic communities together to fly beyond the boundaries of conformism, to evade conventions and enrich existence thanks to power of expression and curiosity. The artistic direction of Tilt creates an innovative offer of alternative sounds and artistic languages with the goals of discovering and promoting innovation of global alternative music, stimulating international circulation of artists, promoting artistic diversity and career development, and generating new audiences. So during this online meeting series, we want to look into the future and create connections with our estimated colleagues, such as Laura, who is here with us today, asking them to take part as speakers in one of our Tilt online training conferences. So this online training aims at imparting knowledge to future artists and young industry professionals. So as I said before, I would like to introduce Laura Camacho Salgado, who is working right now, among other many projects, with the Cultural Transformation Movement project of Trans Europe Halls. And so I would like to welcome you, Laura. We are very glad to have you here today. We believe that the project that you are working on right now, the Cultural Transformation Movement project, has many things in common with Tilt. And we would love to hear about your experience about that project and about many other things that may surround the themes of this conference. So first of all, if you could, we'd love to hear a little bit about yourself, about your experience, and how you came to be a part of the CTM project.
Thank you, Carlos, and thank you everyone for being here and listening me online. First of all, I'm really happy to be part of the first edition of Tilt. And speaking here is a great honor, especially because as just the name is so appealing for me, Turin is louder. And we are here to be louder, and a way to be louder is connecting with each other. First step, I'm meeting you through screen, but hopefully I would meet you in different latitudes. As Carlos said, my name is Laura Camacho Salgado. I'm Colombian, born and raised in Colombia, but it's the last 15 years I've been living in Europe, and bringing that to the consideration because what we're going to talk today is going to be always this kind of connection between the global and the global south and also Europe. I've been working 10 years, more than 10 years in the music industry. Recently, I finished my role as a head of international of Oslo World, a music festival that is um, based in Norway and brings 300 artists from different latitudes to Norway. And as Carlos said, now I'm working with the Cultural Transformation Movement project with Trans Europe AL. And also, I do like to do research as an independent research, and I'm sometimes hosting a class about migration and culture in the University of Oslo. So there's like so many hats, different hats, but I think throughout the talk you will see why we're bringing all this together.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. So one of the first things that we are very curious about, because it's basically a shared principle of both the cultural transformation movement and Tilt, is a certain aspect of both projects, which reads as committing to advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, and access in arts and cultural organizations and the broader arts and the cultural sector. So one of our main goals with this project is precisely focusing on that same broadening, that same accessibility that is sometimes very complicated to achieve because the cultural sector is very intricate, it's very opaque sometimes. So we would like to know from your perspective and from your work, what are the different actions and what are the different um, projects that are going on towards that goal of opening up the sector of culture to a wider, not only audience, but also to a wider scope of professionals and future artists.
Yes. So this is something that it has been constant in my job and my passion, and it's about how to the culture off stage and on stage can represent truly the society that we live on. And as you said, we are in a culture sector that, even though we're talking more and more about more inclusion of new voices, more opening in spaces, is going too slow because the cultural sector has been made and for centuries from a Western white European perspective in which the gatekeepers they are the same. And even though there's a much more topics about that we need to change, then who is taking the responsibility? And with that, it's not only responsibility because each of us we have our privilege from our where we're sitting, which kind of role we're doing, but we're not only the responsibility but the risk. And with that risk, I'm just referring also for economic risk. So there is like a huge gap in which there is not only the cultural sector but education and society in general. They are being for centuries or well centuries, but mainly that we could talk more precisely decades in which there are so many marginalized voices, and there tend to be the same. So it would be, for example, in a gender perspective, it would be more talking about underrepresented genders. So, for example, with that, I have been working, and I want to talk about, for example, a network called Key Change that I worked for several years, in which Key Change is an European network in which they're talking about underrepresented gender in the music industry. Uh, so it's a network that is talking about not only like bringing talent development for artists, but also about talking about policy, how, which kind of policy we need to address this gap, and also about asking, and then they have one part that's called the pledge, addressing also people that they're already seated in the cultural industries to say, okay, this I pledge to do, for example, I don't know, 50-50 gender equality in my lineup, or I'm going to pledge to do gender equality in the recruitment process because I don't know, if part of a national opera or a philharmonic. So all of that, it has to be so different directions. And then that's why, and then it's the purpose of today. It was like how we need to do more, like even though each of us we need to do from our own perspective, the power of this change, it has to be through collaboration, because in a way we're jumping in a system that is already not representative. But if each of us were jumping from our own risk from more independent actors, then it's not going to be enough, and it's not going to be as fast. And it's connected with money, connected with funding, connected how we're going to talk about giving more space for marginalized bodies and marginalized voices if we don't have the proper fees to pay them an artist fee or pay ourselves a fee for working in this. So this has to be in a way of collaboration, and that's why, for example, the role of the Trans Europe House is so important, for example. And then we're going to talk about today about how we connect venues, because it is in the setting of we have a big network that is called Trans Euro House. For the one that they don't are here don't know, this is a network, European-based network that spans across 40 different countries and that is growing. That had been created since 1983, and then this is a network that is started with the idea of connecting grassroots, independent venues. A lot of them, the venues, they're in reuse spaces or urban spaces that maybe they're not meant to be a cultural hub, but for example, a factory that would become a creative hub, these kind of venues, and it's more than 150 members. And I'm putting these numbers because these numbers of collaboration is easier to start saying like, okay, we can go for a project, apply for funding in the European Union, saying we do need to talk about that. And then as network, we're more loud, talking about loud. No, we are here and turning loud. Like if I'm going to go and then I'm going with my own part, like I'm going to change the cultural sector, I'm me, myself, Laura, they're like, okay, thank you. But if it's like, yeah, we're going together, in this case, it's the lead of the funding, like the lead of the project is Trans Zero House, but then inside the project, there is 4 different venues across Europe that is joining in, and they're part of this project. That is Villeneuve in Ghent in Belgium, Brunnen Passage in Vienna in Austria, Zoo in Catania, Italy, and then Isolatia in Ukraine. But now it's like across Europe. So this is the point of that, is like we do need this way of collaboration, because what is the project about? Okay, cultural transformation movement is talking about saying like, how do we talk about underrepresented communities in the art sector? But not in the way like, okay, we will give you a space and you just come to follow the rules of my house, because that's usually what happens. Like the really problematic talks about inclusion, who is including who, and up until now, like, okay, yeah, I open my doors, come in, you do something, and then you follow the house rules. But in this project, saying like, maybe if we need people to come in our house, we make to feel that this is the house of both of us. It's not only me inviting you. This space has to be shared space. And in order to be shared space, we need to create the rules together, no? And this project, that's why it's connected with, on one side, what is called the centers of change. So for example, the venue that I have mentioned before, connected to what is called the agents of change. The agents of change, they're artists that they're working with underrepresented communities in each local center. These two sides, the idea like it goes by hand, because it's saying like, we need to know, it's not only about having numbers, it's not about having quotes, but it's also like, maybe we need to think about thinking about our production ways. We maybe need to talk about our own artistic practices, the language that we use, the way that we interact with arts. And that's why it has to be hands in hands, because then it's the agents of change role saying like, okay, if in our setting we need to work and we want to work with these local communities that we are not reaching, we need to talk about that. We need to talk about this and this. That it goes with any project. For example, with key change, like how we can talk about gender equality if we don't address about, we need to give parental top up, for example, for artists, if they need to bring, for example, a babysitter with them when they're touring, or we need to, so it has to have hand by hand, but it has to be not top down. It has to be all of us together. So that's this kind of project that is not only me saying like, oh, if you want to be in my center, you have to take these rules. I'm like, yeah, maybe this is not what is interesting. So this is what is the project about. It's a 4-year project now, funded by Created Europe. And the idea, like it's going with phases at the beginning, is about how we address each local center and how these learnings could be transferable to the global. Because that's always thing. And when we're talking about connecting venues, then we're going to talk about after. So like, how do we do this? Because if we go too fast, too global, and saying like this is the way to do, then we might replicate this idea of there is that one way to do it. And if in your local community you're not doing it, and your local center, it's like it's already generates a power imbalance. And then if you're going too local, then it's like maybe you need also this share with other centers. So it's like how each time we are aware of where we're like rooted and which kind of dynamics are there, and at the same time how do we create these networks in which there's like a shared practices that we could learn from each other. That's kind of the two parts that we have to like try to balance.
That is very interesting because it subverts the logic that you commented, that is artists have always to adapt to different circumstances under like the total like obligation of, if you want to play here, if you want to work here, you will have to renounce to a lot of aspects of your like mm, way of seeing the world. So I think it's a very important proposal that there is a more equal approach to connecting venues and artists. And taking like from this precise idea, I have a question for you, which is, do you have like any ideas or like specific suggestions about how to integrate communities through artistic programming?
I think it has to be two sides. Like first, like the first question, like you have to ask which is the community that you want to integrate and why you're not reaching them. Because sometimes we're really easy going towards like, oh, we need to integrate these communities, and we go towards. And then before, I feel like the step before that is like asking your own self, like, why this community is not, I'm not reaching. And with that, we do need to also always do also research about not claiming some bias that's saying like, oh, maybe I'm not reaching this community because we this and this and this. Okay, if you're going to start establishing it, do a research before, and then also start asking also the communities that you're working with already, how they're reaching your center, for example. Also, like to start thinking which strategies you're doing using. Once you have done your research, you're doing all of that, and then you're also asking yourself, then it's also like trying to work with artists that they're already part of the communities, and then also understanding under which terms they want to be working with you also, because it's always it's a it's a work of unlearning all the time, but also it's a work of also asking. um One thing that is so important with venues is like also it's not only about reaching communities, but also fostering the community that they have been also working with for years, no? That the difference between venues and, for example, large scale festival. And that's why there is so important to fight for the well-being of the venues locally, because having a healthy environment of venues seems like it mirrors in a healthy environment globally. For example, my point being like the local venues is not only important for economic reasons, because a venue is not only about just one ticket sale. We know all that. It's about the ticket sale, but it's about the transport cost, but it's also about the how food, all of that is like, but this is like is economic movement in the local economy. So one part is that, and it's also a long term kind of economic boost in a way. Not the same like with large scale events. This comes and goes, and that's it. The other part is like venues. And then it's also about like, if you have a venue, like which kind of power you have, because venues also is not only reaching communities, but it's also creating communities. And with that saying, like not necessarily maybe only talking the community as this is one community, this is another, but reaching bridges between communities. So that's also, this is something important, and it's also something that maybe takes time. And that's something that is complicated because usually a lot of venues, and especially if they're independent, that time we don't have, because it's also about budgets, it's about increase of rent, and it's a increase of electricity, all of that. But it's this kind of creation of community that would last longer. And then also, obviously, and then also we know about that, and it was a lot more studied with pandemic, but it's like the impact of these places for the mental health of communities is really important. And well, music in general, but we're talking about like people attending live music, for example. In theory, according to the World Health Organization, saying like would it might have less possibility of dementia, for example. Or we have the report saying like, okay, if you go attend concerts or live music, then you risk to have longer, like you will probably get benefits for having a longer life. So this is also about, but that's locally. So this is kind of things that is not only one time that there is a big concert that would come to your place, but it's more about what is happening. And then that's it's important because it's something that is an ecosystem that is like taking care. Then it's also the talent would come, and we're talking about the talent, which yeah, every musician had to start playing also in a grassroots venue. And it's like that is the way that is the culture moves. It's also those places, for example, that would increase much more emergent artists at other places. So that's why it's important about your question. Like, okay, but if it's always the same emergent artists from the same communities, then uh, how can I address other communities that they're around my local area? And I don't know. Or it could be also connected to, yeah, the developing process of my area had changed communities, people that they were not there 30 years ago. Now they're here. What can I do? This is, and then we have to always remember, usually people working in venues and culture, we don't have so much time. People have 3 jobs, 2 jobs. They're not like, oh, I will have time to do a 1 year research for that. But then it's also asking like really specific questions to yourself, like which language you're approaching. Are you approaching the same language that the person that you want to talk? Seeing, for example, artists, being the staff or being audience, are we talking the same language? Maybe we could talk about that in both Italian and another language. And maybe even in between your own language, saying like, okay, which kind of Italian I'm talking? Is this maybe too academic? I am asking for, I don't know, uh, an artist that is woodworking artist, and then I'm talking about if it would be like a professor in the university. Why I'm doing this kind of things, and also about accessibility. Like if your person that you're invited doesn't seem that could access what you're hosting, but also not doesn't seem welcome, then obviously it's not going to want to work with that. That's part. That also something that is always talking about that, but so like be aware who you are booking, for example. If it's in the recruitment process, where you're posting your job that you're given in the is through your network of friends, is through where are you posting that, first of all. Second, if it's like for artists, like which kind of booking are you doing? Uh, and then, okay, maybe you could also put it in numbers, like how many artists of this gender I'm booking every year. It's not because it's just about quotas, but it's just to put you more aware. The quality and the talent is everywhere, and it's no matter which kind of body you are in, there's talent everywhere. But which kind of the we have our own biases, no? So that's the thing. Like, just recheck what you're booking, but also it's about how you host the people that you're booking, and a lot of time happening with underrepresented communities or marginalized artists. A lot of time they are connected with the fact that maybe they have to play for free because it would be on exchange of visibility. So like we have to stop about that. It's like, how can people expect that having visibility is the same having a salary? So we have to treat this kind of thing. And especially if you're already in a marginalized position, then it's even worse. Like, we have to talk about things like, for example, if you're talking about an artist that, for example, your legal status in your country is through a visa, and that visa requires that it gets proper salary, then it has to have a proper salary. Cannot play for free. This not goes well for your applying for your resident permit. So this is kind of thing. So it's all of this kind of thing. It's not one way, because also it's about, now we're sharing, and then towards, for example, this project, cultural transformation movement project, maybe in 4 years time we will have more accessible toolkits about like strategies. But even about this kind of strategies, also it's also being more aware of the power that we have, each of us as gatekeepers, and then also asking ourselves before asking them, no, like, why are my rules, they're not appealing for this kind of artists? And then treat all your artists like accordingly. It's not because it's not a lot of if you're talking about diversity and equity thing, there are a lot of policies that have been already, like, maybe a lot in the European Union for the last 10 years. So we are more aware of that. But a lot of that is like this kind of quick fixes ways of thinking that, okay, diversity, we click how many people there are, how many, instead of saying like, no, we need to have a systemic change. So we need to also be more aware of other ways of working, be more aware of other kind of soundscapes, be more aware of other ways to communicate it, that we have to change from our side. So this is kind of and then it's a lot of local understanding. Like, if today we're talking about the venues that we have and the social impact that the venues have, then it's also about thinking like under your own terms in the neighborhood that you're in, how can also develop these long lasting relationships. So yeah.
Well, thank you very much for everything you've told us. It's been completely interesting, and although we don't have any more time left for this conference, we will be able to continue this conversation further at Tilt next November because we will have you with us in Torino. So thank you very much once again, Laura, for your very interesting insight on these matters, and we are very happy to be able to see you soon in Torino. Thank you very much.
Thank you.